Hello and welcome to another episode of Death by Bunjie. I am Rich Wilson, the host of Death by Bunjie, the host of Talking with Bunjie, the podcast. And what we're going to talk about today, it's about arrows and crossbows, as we're getting ready to build some arrows for our Manitoba bear hunting trip, right? I got to build arrows for me and Genevieve, for the SWAT X1 for me and Genevieve's Bunjie Jr., an Excalibur 355 micro suppressor. I am in a hotel room in Auburn, New York. Genevieve is downstairs at the United Taxidermists of New York conference. She has taken some classes on taxidermy. A few weeks ago, we went to the Pennsylvania conference, right? The Pennsylvania Taxidermists Association conference. If you want to follow Genevieve's channel or on YouTube or on Facebook, it is secondlifetaxidermy.com, and links to her social media stuff are in the description of all my new videos on YouTube and all that good stuff. Easy to find. Building a perfect crossbow arrow. Part one of this video series is deciding how much we want those arrows to weigh. Okay, what is the ideal weight? But the answer isn't just as simple as you might think it is, but it kind of turns out it is pretty simple. Heavier is better, right? We probably think that as a preliminary topic, a preliminary idea. Heavier is going to be a little bit better because we need maximum penetration. A pass-through shot on a black bear is very important, not only so that you inflict the maximum amount of damage, but so that you get the maximum blood trail as well. Black bears are going to have, especially in the spring, they're going to have their winter coats a little bit still, nice long coats that haven't been rubbed, the coat is going to be a little nicer on a spring black bear because they've been hibernating, right? They've been in torpor for a significant period of time. They're just coming out of that state. And as a result of that, their hair's a little bit longer, and the hide's a little bit thicker. The hair is a little bit thicker, and that's going to hold blood. It's going to make it a little bit more difficult to get that blood trail on the ground. We're going to be in tree stands, most likely shooting down. We want to make sure that we have an exit wound so that we can spill blood on the forest floor and be able to track those bears. With archery equipment, with crossbows, we are going to see bears run off. We're not going to be seeing them wadded up right there at the bait barrel, right there on site, unfortunately, like some of the rifle hunters would do. There's going to be a blood trail to follow. So we have to take that into account. And to get the maximum blood trail, we want the maximum swhackerage, right? We want the 150 grain Swhacker, 3-inch cutting diameter, get that slice of 3 inches going out the other side of that bear. So really what I'm going for, I am hunting the dirt on the other side of the bear. You know what I'm saying? I want an exit wound that allows my arrow to leave a really good blood trail, really good penetration. Anything less than a pass-through is failure, and I want about a foot of dirt on the other side of that bear. I want to bury it in the dirt on the other side. I can tell you last year, right? I went up there, and that's exactly what happened. What arrows was I using last year? The dragon claws. Now, it isn't just the arrow, right? It's the broadhead, it's the overall package, including the crossbow. The SWAT X1, I used the enforcer up there, right? And had great success. Now, I'm on to the unnamed SWAT X1. That SWAT X1 is going to earn a name on this trip, but we're still looking to shoot with the same crossbow, so it's going to be the same amount of energy going into the arrow either way. The question is how much weight that we want in that arrow. Now, with that arrow weighing around 500 grains, we got a pass through on that big black bear, didn't we? That black bear weighed 250 to 300, somewhere in that range. Got a pass through on that bear. Real happy with that performance. It was a perfect shot and a perfect pass through, so I'm very happy with that. But I still want to talk about Genevieve's arrows as well. She's shooting a 355 micro suppressor from Excalibur. It gets 355 feet per second with a 350 grain arrow. I'm telling you flat out right now, that overall arrow weight is insufficient, inadequate, and unacceptable for Death by Bunjie. We don't hunt with that. We will not go into the woods with that, even on whitetail deer. We look for heavier arrows. We want something in the 400s to hunt whitetail deer. So do we want something even heavier for bears, right? Maybe. Let's talk about that. Let's run some numbers with the calculators on deathbybunjie.com. Let's see what we got, and I'll post those numbers throughout this video. We'll talk about that, but we're trying to get our head around what arrow weight. It's possible that the same arrow weight that we use for whitetails is good enough, but maybe we want to go a little heavier, right? But you got to decide that before you start working on the arrows. That's step number one in deciding what arrows to use. So let's get old Grumpy Hunter on the horn here and see what he has to say. Let's talk first about what arrow weights you think are appropriate for hunting Manitoba black bears. As a guy, old grumpy hunter who has been to Manitoba hunting big black bears and also, basically killed the second bear he saw, Sat around for a few days to get his money's worth, but,
Sat around for a few days.
Wouldn't let him get away.
First night, the tree wanted to knock me out of the air with all the wind. Good thing I was tied in. Arrow weights. Well,
what did you use? Now, the bear you killed was 300, 350 pounds, somewhere in that ballpark, probably. A big boar. Right. And what arrow weight did you use?
I was pushing 475, 495 range. Blood sport. They weigh about 350 by them, 325 by themselves. Throw in a Luminoc and then put a 150 grain Swhacker.
All right.
But that really, of course, my shot was not the world's best because the bear wouldn't cooperate.
That probably put you around the 500 grain mark, though.
Yeah, right around.
With the Luminoc.
Yeah. I know I weighed it beforehand, but that was, almost a year ago.
Oh, gotcha. And what crossbow were you using, Gary?
That was my Parker.
Oh, Parker.
It's rated at 350. Yeah. It was rated at 350.
Do you have any idea what speed you got with that 500 grainer?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't have.
Fortunately, I have connections, and those connections put together some really nice calculators that are available on deathbybunjie.com. I'm talking about you, Gary. You're the connection. So, and
you said calculators. I know what you're talking about. I don't know if I do a connection or not.
I will use our calculators to determine the overall speed. Flash that on the screen, so insert that into the podcast here or whatever we do with this down the road. If it's recording, really, I don't know. Genevieve's going with me. Last year it was me and Gary conquering Manitoba together with our crossbows, and this year it'll be Genevieve and I going up there. Genevieve has her micro suppressor. It's an Excalibur 355 feet per second crossbow, but that gets that 350 feet per second with a 350 grain arrow. And we've got her using arrows that are approaching 500 grains, very similar to Gary's arrows that he used, shooting bears approximately the same size, hopefully 300 to 350 pounds. That'd be great, Genevieve. For her first bear, that would be phenomenal. She's shooting right now around 300 feet per second, 305, I think it was, with an arrow that's like 490. Okay, so we're kind of in that ballpark, and I want to see what kinetic energy and what momentum, Gary will tell us about that, we got with Gary's arrows, the arrows that he used when he was in Manitoba. Parker, out of the box, gets its 350 feet per second or so, that speed rating, using what weight of arrow? Do you know? Do you remember? It's only been 20 years since they made Parkers, so I'm sure that's fresh in your mind.
Yeah, but, my lifetime warranty ended 3 months after I bought it. They sold all their inventory to somebody in Canada, I believe, and they're not making bows; they're just selling off parts.
What was used to get the 350 feet per second? Were they shooting 350 grain arrows or 400 grain arrows? 390,
400, because I don't have any of their arrows left. That haven't been either modified or broken. They were, I think that was advertised at like 400 grain arrow.
Okay.
With the field point.
So we can assume that you're probably 325, 320, 325 with the heavier arrow. Maybe not that much, maybe 315 or so. Because if they started at 400, that's better than starting at the 350. You have access to our energy calculator, right? Just the basic energy calculator. Yeah. Why don't you run up for us real quick? What's Parker? Let's just say 315 with a 500. What'd you get for energy on that?
Kinetic energy is 110. and 0.699 slugs.
Ooh, that's right close to that 0.7 threshold that I like to see.
Yeah, you like that 0.7.
That's my thing. That's the magic number. That's the perfect one, right? Now, with that level of energy, you approaching the point, you weren't quite there, but right at the threshold of 0.7 slugs of momentum, with that arrow speed, that arrow weight. Tell us about your bear hunt and tell us what you accomplished in terms of penetration. And I know that the shot, your first bear was just like my first bear, and the shot isn't exactly what we envisioned leading up to the shot, but nonetheless, you recovered the bear, right? We got the bear the next day. So tell us about that, basically how the shot, about the penetration, that sort of thing that you got with that arrow.
Well, my point of aim and my point of impact obviously were not the same because the bear moved during the arrow flight, and I ended up with a gut shot. And the arrow did, it went through the bear. It didn't exit on impact, but it did poke 2 holes in it.
With a 3-inch Swhacker, 3-inch cutting diameter broadhead. Yeah, okay.
And as the bear ran off, my Luminoc was wiggling in the air. Yeah, so
okay.
It took the arrow with it, and but it also was fatally wounded. It just didn't know it was going to die yet.
The important thing is, and I'll tell you, it was very, very similar to my main bear with Bunjie with my old crossbow. Basically, I got a pass through, not immediately. The bear carried off with the arrow, did get a pass through. There was enough energy there to cut through the other side, just not actually pull the arrow out the hide. The weight of the arrow had to do that. That 150 grain broadhead, the front and center of that arrow is what helped to get enough juice at the end of that shot to eventually fall to the other side.
Going.
Yeah.
And if the bear hadn't moved, I probably would have had a kill shot right then and there.
Yep.
But it is what it is.
Now, you went in behind the rib cage, I'm thinking. Did it exit through the rib cage? Did it have to cut any bone on the way out? Or just hide?
No, it actually went more down because of being elevated. It went on a downward trajectory and basically came out the lower half of the body.
And how far was your shot?
What was those? Those were about 15, 20 yards.
Yeah, I was going to say under 20 yards. So, and pretty much that's the way it is with bears that in our experience. Did you have any stands where you were beyond 20 yards?
No, all of them were within 20 yards.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. So I think we're pretty solid on that. I have to build an arrow that gets Genevieve somewhere close to that 0.7. You agree with that? That's probably pretty sound.
I would say anything above 6.5 would work. I know you love that 0.7, and that's 0.7 of 32 plus feet per pounds per force. Tell me what a slug is. You got a pretty good impact. I mean, once you get into the hide, through the hide, and the way the Swhackers work, they're not going to open up until you got clean blades when it's inside the body. And I mean, if she can get through the tough hide out of a pig, and kill it or wound it so that it takes a second shot, but that's okay. I mean, we both have that problem.
That's a good point. She did get a pass through on her wild boar there, 2 pass throughs, and she's in the 2-shot club still, but she got 2 pass throughs with her current arrow setup, her current arrow weight, shooting, I think it's like 470, 490, somewhere in there total. I don't know exactly, but I do want to see if I can get her closer, as long as we're building arrows. The other nice thing about these arrows that I have, Gary, and you've seen this before, but I can add and take away inserts. The nice thing about the Burt Coyote Luminoc is it's not cemented in, so I can pull the knock out, right? And down the tube, down the shaft of the arrow, I can feed another insert and add, I've got 75 grain inserts. So for the purposes of our bear hunt, now obviously we need to sight in for this, right? And then re-sight in if you take the insert out. But if I drop that 75 grains in there, I can add an extra 75 grains, really up the weight, really up the momentum, because that weight is half of our momentum calculation. And then once that's done, we go kill a bear with that heavier arrow, right? That might put her. I can put her up to 600 grains pretty easy with inserts if it takes that to get into like the 0.7s. We're depending on where we want to be with this, and then back those inserts back out. They aren't cemented in. I can just screw them in tight, and they'll be good enough for use in the backyard. Double check them, good enough to hunt with, and then we can unscrew those and take them out. If you're going to leave them in there, you'd want to cement them in. But I think that's a pretty solid plan. You like that idea, do you?
Well, I just calculated at 550 for arrow weight, and I estimated 285 for arrow speed.
Okay.
That gives you a 0.695.
0.695. Oh, yeah, we're right there then. Yeah, that's real close to that mark. And 550, you said?
550. I'm just guessing at the...
Yeah, at the speed and stuff. We can get actual numbers, and I'll do that. We'll play around with a few to get the actual numbers. I don't think 550 is too much for a bear hunt. That's basically her existing arrow weight, but adding that 75 grain insert. I think that's a pretty solid arrow weight for bears shooting 550, right? Especially when we know the shot is limited to 15, 20 yards. You're never shooting past 20 pretty much an hour experience, limited experience, but nonetheless our experience up there. I think we're pretty solid if we're staying 20 and under with a 550. I think that'd be fine. Technically, I could probably just use her existing arrows without too much hassle, without too much trouble, and get the same thing that we're trying to accomplish here with just adding that insert. I don't necessarily have to go the whole route of building a new arrow, but I do want to build a new arrow just because it's fun.
For a guy who doesn't like tinkering.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, I know. Over the years, I really just resisted that time and again, but I even bought an arrow saw, Gary. So I'm pretty committed to this. So I can cut them down and do it all the right way, man. No Dremel tools here. Dremel tools and JB Weld before, but now we're doing it the real deal.
I'll start sending my stuff to you.
There you go. Yeah, I'll saw a bunch of them for you. Spine test them and everything. I got a little spine tester. So the ones that she's got now are AJ's custom arrows. Those are spine tested. They're beautiful arrows.
I don't think you need to make much change there, bud.
Yeah, well, I don't like to hear that. I like changing stuff. So on mine with the SWAT X1, I think mine are somewhere in the same, like I'm shooting 360, but it's around 475 grains. And I'm down to 360 with that on the SWAT X1. Those arrows do struggle a little bit. It does slow the crossbow down quite a bit when you go to when you start up in the arrow weight. It really does surprise us, I think, in terms of how much effect it has on speed. But speed is not this is not whitetail deer. This is not some of the faster African game or anything like that. This is
not going to, they can duck, but they're not going to jump.
Right. They're going to roll maybe, but not at 15 yards, really.
No. I mean, even with my bear, the reason it moved is because it was getting ready to leave the territory.
Yeah.
It came in, took a couple of mouthfuls of food, decided it wasn't what he wanted that night, thought maybe a raccoon would probably taste better, and moved on. Was starting to move on. And, of course, it was raining. Part of those, this is not an excuse. This is what was happening. It was raining that night. I was covered up with a poncho. Crossbow was under the poncho with me, and I had to uncover everything without being seen. So I lost a lot of opportunity because of the rain. If it hadn't been raining, I really think things would have been different, but it is what it is. Getting back to Genevieve, because like I said, the hide on a pig is a lot tougher than a bear. We both shot pigs, we both shot bears, so it's yes, there's a lot of fur, especially but in the spring, they don't have all that fat because they've been hibernating. Their coat is also a little thinner because of hibernation. So if you're going to send that little short 16.5-inch dart, I don't think she's going to have a problem. Its shot placement is, which we all have struggled with now and then, is what's going to kill the bear. But if you're pushing 0.69 slugs of momentum at 100 plus pounds of kinetic energy, I don't think you need to make many modifications. So again,
you make another good point. She's got a 16.5-inch arrow, which right. I think overall is going to be a little easier to push out the other side of a bear than a 20-inch arrow, just right. because you need less of a pass through.
Now, it also could get stopped inside the bear. I mean, the bear's wider than that arrow is. But the thing is, and I know she's an experienced hunter. She's hunted from tree stands before. She's hunted from tree stands before, done beautiful shots on deer. She's done good shots on pigs from the ground, even doing a walk and stalk. But sitting up in a tree stand, and here comes in the 250 or bigger bear, that's a whole different set of nerves kicking in, because a hurt bear is an angry bear. And, that's one reason we backed out both times, you and I, because the bear was hurt and we didn't want to have to, see if we could outrun whoever's with us. But
our guides were also of that opinion. That was the other thing. I don't think it was just you and me. I was convinced my bear in Manitoba was dead, but it wasn't my bear that I was worried about. It was the 6 other bears I saw that night that were just waiting to come in and keep feeding at the barrel all night long, and they aren't afraid of us or necessarily.
And when I got to my site on that third night, I wasn't lucky enough to see any bears until then, like somebody else. The feed barrel was tipped over, and it had been standing up 45 minutes before that. So there'd already been bears there. So, I don't know what else was around. I know there was a sow around someplace. Maybe that's what the boar was going to go after. He only took a mouthful or two and was heading out. He had smelled that sow. I don't know. He didn't tell me. He didn't, give me an insight. But still, different set of nerves in shooting the bear. I don't know. I think Genevieve's arrows are going to be able to do the job with that Swhacker on board.
It sounds like both of the arrows that we set up, that we have right now, that we use for white-tailed deer, are probably going to be adequate based on the energy numbers. I don't disagree with you one bit. And what I find interesting about that is, though, the little asterisk, that doesn't apply to everybody, because not everybody uses, you and me and Genevieve, we all tend to gravitate toward those a little bit heavier arrows anyway. Well, based on that discussion, I think I got a good plan as to the weight of these arrows. I think that the SWAT X1, shooting around 500 grains with the dragon claws, arrows around that weight are probably going to be satisfactory on the SWAT X1 on a modern crossbow. Yeah, I used them on white-tailed deer out to 32 yards. Had great success with those. Deer didn't really even drop an inch, and they took that arrow, went right straight through, pass-throughs on all the deer. Everything you could ask for, leaving the arrow just laying in the food plot or just laying in the soybean field on the other side of those deer. Had great success with those with the Enforcer back in 2023. And a black bear, right? And a black bear in 2024. So I think that weight, shooting around that weight's probably going to be okay. Now, arrow length, I might be shortening those arrows. okay? Shortening those arrows up a little bit, going from 20 inches down to 19, and there's a reason for that. I bought an arrow saw, and that'll be the subject of the next video in this series. We'll start doing something like that. We'll talk about whether that's going to be appropriate. If we shorten them down a little bit, we're also taking about 9 grains off of there, aren't we? I think they're like 9 or 9.1 grains per inch. So if we take an inch off, we're dropping it. So we'll be under that 500. Do we want to add an insert and increase the weight, maybe add that back in? There's various ways to do that. We can talk about that to stay around that same weight. On the other hand, we can run some numbers and see if we like what we got. We can see if we like what we got as far as those momentum numbers are concerned. If I'm still comfortably, let's say, in the 0.7s, then probably I don't have to worry about that. 0.7, I just love the 0.7, right? That was the question I got not too long ago. Somebody asked me, I just took a hunter safety course, and in that hunter safety course it says that
35 foot-pounds of kinetic energy is all you need to kill a white-tailed deer, right? And if you look up on all these fancy charts, they say you only need 40 foot-pounds of kinetic energy to kill a bear.
Remember the old moose days we had on Death by Bunjie? We'd go through and see if it moosed or not. Back then you only needed like 70 foot-pounds of kinetic energy to moose. To kill a moose with it, right? The biggest thing in North America. Kill a moose. I don't care. That stuff doesn't mean anything to me. Those are phony numbers made up by vertical bow hunters, right? To make themselves feel good about their lesser forms of archery equipment. How about that, right? And I'm only saying that, tongue-in-cheek. But the reality is, I am a crossbow hunter, and I want 0.7 slugs of momentum or better. Because I have used the lesser stuff, right? I've shot with a lot less, and I've shot with a lot more. And I've shot in the 0.7s, and I've seen the value of the 0.7s, and I won't hunt with anything less than that. As a modern crossbow hunter, that's what modern crossbow hunting is. It's the 0.7s. So shoot for the 0.7s. Dr. Ed Ashby and all you heavy arrow guys, we love Dr. Ed Ashby. I'm kind of a heavier arrow guy myself. We don't need the 600 grain arrows, the 700 grain arrows. We don't need that with crossbows because we get what they were trying to achieve with a 400 grain arrow, typically, right out of the box. 400 at 400 puts you in the 0.7s. That's the rule of 400, right? That's the definition of a modern crossbow, one that shoots about 400 grains at about 400 feet per second. If you can do that, you are you're shooting something that's pretty much in the mix of the modern crossbows. If I can get Genevieve in those 0.7s and I can stay in the 0.7s, we're probably good to go. So we've decided the weight, I think overall. I'm going to go with a 19-inch, the Dragon Claw style arrow. I am going to crop mine down to 19 inches and try and stay the 470s or so, shooting somewhere 470 grains total arrow weight, shooting still 360 feet per second or so with my SWAT X1, because that extra weight, once you start stepping up in weight, you start slowing the crossbows down. Genevieve's slows down quite a bit, so I'll probably, with hers, we'll cut them down to the 16.5 inches that they like, but we will cut hers down to and we'll add a little bit of weight for the bears to get her comfortably in the 0.7s. If you want to talk about momentum, you want to learn more about kinetic energy, all that good stuff, I did a ton of videos. Go check those out. There's lots of information on the internet. But just remember, the information you get from guys that shoot primarily vertical bows isn't necessarily, they're not really talking about crossbows. They're talking about vertical bows. And you got to think about it, and you got to translate that to crossbows. Here on Death by Bunjie, you don't have to worry about that. I've already translated it to crossbows, because that's all we do here is crossbows. Crossbows and crossbow hunting. It's very simple. I hope you're getting something out of this video. I hope you enjoy this series on arrow building. The next one, we're going to pick some shafts. I've already pretty much decided on the Dragon Claws, but I haven't told you why, and I will in the next video. We'll get all that information in the next video. Until next time, all hail Bunjie.